Now, over the past 3 years, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Attah, has been coming to the August House of Parliament to present budgets to the honourable members. He presented in 2017, 2018 and 2019, if you do not count the media budget reviews. Now, today, he walked in here and presented a 2020 budget statement. Yes, a statement which essentially projected GDP growth at 6.8%. He is expecting revenue to be around 67.1 billion, expenditure at 85.9 billion, which leads us to close to 20 billion Ghana cedis in deficit. Now, how are we going to fund this? Well, I mean, in this particular budget also, he spoke of the fact that government is not going to introduce any new taxes. Government essentially will be setting up also a national development bank to take care of the agriculture and the industrial sector. But what does all of these mean for you? Budget deficit, budget debt to GDP. What does all of this mean to the ordinary Ghanaian? We have been speaking to some members of parliament as well as other individuals to break the budget down for you on the Citi Newsroom. My name is Bobiose. Let's head in there to find out what happened in parliament today. Budget presentations in the past 3 years have been characterized by some few things. The finance minister, for example, has been accompanied on a number of occasions by the vice president, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. We also normally see some dignitaries or high-ranking members of the government, such as the senior minister, Ya Osafo-Mafo. We also see people like the Auditor General, Daniel Domelevo, among many other faces. What you also usually notice is the heated interaction between the different sides of the House. The minority, most of the time, disagreeing with the utterances of the finance minister, while the majority are always in support. We saw minority members from time to time interjecting and expressing their displeasure with utterances of the finance minister. In some instances, you could hear them mentioning the name of the former president, John Mahama. Well, at the end of today's presentation, the minority expressed their displeasure by showcasing papers with a bye-bye budget in reaction to the finance minister's call for a renewal of the mandate of the new patriotic party after his presentation. The majority essentially showed their support for the finance minister as usual, while the minority went on to show their displeasure. So what might have garnered these reactions on the floor of Parliament? Well, my colleague Duke Mensah Opoku brings us a report on the highlights of today's presentation.
The 2020 Budget and Financial Policy Statement of Government, which is anchored on consolidating the gains for growth, jobs and security, projects overall economic growth at 6.8%. A fiscal deficit of 4.6% is anticipated in an election year with a firm promise not to overspend. Government expects to raise 67.1 billion Ghana cedis by way of revenue, with a total expenditure of 85.9 billion cedis. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Attah touched on the banking sector cleanup and outlined new measures for the banks under the Ghana Amalgamated Trust portfolio.
NIB, under the GATT initiative, has also developed a new strategy that will transform it into a specialized bank. Going forward, NIB shall focus on promoting industrialization by deploying the right products and services to finance industry across the country and in line with national development priorities. In this regard, Parliament is requested to approve a 2.2 billion put-call option from government to GATT to enable it to raise the required funding for NIB via preference shares. This will replace the government guarantee to GATT that was previously approved.
Despite the cancellation of the PDS deal, Ken Ofori-Attah indicated government's firm resolve to follow through with the private sector participation in the management of ECG.
Mr. Speaker, as we all know, on July 30th, 2019, government suspended the Power Distribution Service, PDS concession, following government's detection of fundamental and material breaches of PDS's obligation in the provision of payment securities for the transaction and related matters. After further investigation and extensive consultation with relevant stakeholders, Government on October 19, 2019, announced its decision to terminate the PDS concession. Regardless, Ghana is fully committed to private sector participation in ECG and is focused on moving forward with urgency to find a suitable replacement for the PDS arrangements. Moreover, we are prepared to review the transaction structure and indeed recognize the need to improve significantly the management of ECG by bringing in world-class private sector expertise and attracting adequate private capital.
In response to concerns from many Ghanaians on the poor nature of roads, the finance minister announced that the sector will be given the needed attention.
To get the road sector moving and contractors back to work, government will pay 80% of all contractors. Mr. Speaker, we have identified critical roads across each of the 60 regions, and construction will begin on all these critical roads. Cocoa Board has also secured funds to continue ongoing and new cocoa roads. Work on these roads will also commence soon. As part of our new initiative to complement the traditional execution of road projects, we have launched, Mr. Speaker, the Accelerated Community Road Improvement Initiative. Just yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the 48th Engineers Regiment of the Ghana Armed Forces has started work in Soweto and were able, Mr. Speaker, within a day to do over 4 kilometers of road. Mr. Speaker, the first phase of the Sino-Hydro arrangement is finally taking off. We have also been able to mobilize financing for over 150 other roads nationwide.
Headquarters, also known as KIA, received some good news from the budget.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to announce that preparations are now complete and the construction of the 600-bed KIA hostel will commence in Abobloshi next month to provide accommodation and skill training to these vulnerable young women.
2020 is an election year. Government says the Electoral Commission will be given the resources necessary for the conduct of credible elections.
So you had the finance minister, a number of targets for the year 2020, one of them being, for example, overall GDP growth of 6.8%, overall a fiscal deficit of 4.7 thereabout percent. But what does all of these mean for you at home? Fiscal deficit, debt to GDP ratio, expenditure, revenue. What does it mean for you at home? I have here with me a member of the finance committee to help to break it down for us. Senior, a lot of jargon's been thrown around year on year. For the ordinary Ghanaians on the street there, how would you break this budget down, the salient points that are in there, and what it means for the taxi driver or the cocoa seller out there in terms of revenue, expenditure, GDP growth?
Let's demystify everything about this budget. There are three arms to the budget. Revenues that will come to the government within the year, expenditures that the government will make is the second arm, and the third arm is whether or not the two are in tandem. If there is a surplus, what is government going to do with the surplus? If there's a deficit, how is the deficit going to be funded?
GDP growth rate for 2020 will be 6.8%. What are you trying to say? The economy, our efforts put together, would ensure that Ghana's economy grows. I need you to break those.
When we say GDP, it's gross domestic product. And gross domestic product is a sum total of all the economic activity that take place within the economy within the year. Your work, all of us, every productive venture that happens. And so every year we measure. Currently, when we say our GDP in Ghana, it is projected to be at 340 billion in 2020. And so everything relates to this GDP. And then when we say GDP growth rate, it means that at what rate is our GDP growing? At 2016, before we came into power, our economy was growing at the rate of 3.4%. Today, we are talking in excess of 7%. It means that the economy is expanding much faster. And when the economy expands, then job creation follows. Then it means that more economic activity is happening. It means that the country is progressing. It means that there is progress within the government. And that is what we say when we say GDP, when we talk about those indices.
The finance minister is calling the year 2020, the year of roads. Is this going to be a repetition of promises without any action?
I don't think so. It's quite instructive that this is also coming from the NDC. The NDC gave us a green book. And in the green book, they said they had done infrastructure. So you expect that most of our roads would have been fixed even before we came into power. But that is where we are. We have been exposed, showing that if these roads were actually fixed some 3 years ago and we are in the States, then we should be asking questions as to which roads were fixed, how were they fixed, at what cost, and why are we here at this point?
All right, sir.
We are saying that this is what we have done so far. So far, we have been able to do asphalt overlay of 206 kilometers. So far, we have been able to routinely maintain over 7,000 kilometers. So far, we have done feeder roads of 18,000. So far, we have done trunk roads of 9,000. And this year, already through Sino Hydro, we are getting the inner city roads in Accra, in Takoradi, in Kumasi. All are being swept. Some change in Tamale is happening. This year, 2020, we're going to see more of our roads fixed. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so very much. In the background, we have Honorable Fifi Kwete. He will be speaking to us, to basically share his thoughts. Hello, Honorable.
How are you, my brother?
I'm great, sir. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Citi Newsroom. So, going on, how did you essentially, receive this particular budget? Just your initial thoughts.
To be honest, I was expecting a bit more. I was expecting that in the final budget, we were going to have a complete departure for what we have seen over the last 4 years, which really has been a complete focus on consumption as opposed to developmental expenditure. What it is we have seen today actually shows that it's really going to be the same story. Because look at, for example, the amount of money that we are committing to infrastructure. Out of the total GDP of the country, maximum of about 2% is being committed to capital expenditure. And that's a massive disappointment. Now, over the last 4 years, if you look at it on average, I don't think we have been able to hit even 2% as an average. NDC in 2016 was doing about 4.5% of GDP that was used for capital expenditure. For you to condemn that 4.5 and spend 4 years, and within that 4 years, this government has had what you call available to it the most astronomical resource envelope. 200 billion cedis minimum is what money has been available over this period. We are not adding what is coming next year. The whole of the 8 years of the NDC, the totality of the resource envelope available was about 240 billion. And within that limited 240 billion, there is so much that you can see everywhere you pass.
They are saying that if the roads were fixed by you, we shouldn't be having people clamoring for roads in all parts of the country, like our reports, out there have shown. What do you have to say to that?
That again is what you call gross irresponsibility. Because you see what? When you take over a country, you take it to be able to continue what has been done. Over the last 4 years, you know what has happened effectively. Let me tell you. The road fund, the amount of money that has been taken away from the road fund to be used for consumption. The first year, they took out of the road fund 800 million cedis. That's almost getting to 1 billion. The second year, they took 600 million. That's 1.4 billion. The third year, they took 1.2. That's what, 2.6. This year, they are intending to take another 600. So that works to, about 3.2 billion. Do you know how much 3.2 billion they could have done for the roads in this country for 4 years, which they have used for nothing but consumption? And then you turn around to blame the previous government for your inability to work on infrastructure. This government has shown to be totally indictable, irresponsible, empty promise people. They have not been able to deliver because they believe that all they have to do is to continue blaming the previous government for their incompetence and for their inability to perform.